Hey, Cookies here. We are going to go through Azure Vault in Bigwigs. So to open up our Bigwig settings, just type /BW. And as a preface, I would go check out the Agathar Academy video first. That one I go in the most in-depth in my thought process and all that. I'll just briefly cover those things here. But the essential tips that I have that carry forward across all of Bigwigs and setting up for Raid, Mythic Plus, it doesn't matter what type of content, is you want to have specific sounds for specific situations. And for these, personally, I use things like when I have a dangerous debuff on myself, whether it's in Raid or Mythic Plus, I will always have it be a very similar sound when I have a dangerous debuff so that I know to press a defensive, things to dispel, and also things that you need to move with or do some kind of special mechanic with that you are responsible for. And then lastly, I always try to find one important ability from each boss in every dungeon to set up a countdown timer for. So today we're going to be talking about Azure Vault, and we're going to start with Leymor, the first boss, and we'll just kind of go through each individual ability, and then I'll just decide if I want to make an adjustment to that ability's alerts or anything like that, and then we'll go from there. So the first one is the leyline sprouts. That's just where the trees spawn out of the ground. Don't need anything for that. That's just visually represented very easily. We have explosive brand, which is where everybody gets knocked back. We take an unavoidable amount of group damage, and then everybody needs to stand by different trees and blow them up. And you want to clear all the trees with all of the explosive brands. So for this, I would probably put a countdown timer for, just so that we can kind of pre-position, since as the ability happens, we all get knocked back. So if aren't aware that the ability is happening until he's casting it, it's going to be too late and we're going to get knocked back. So having a little bit of a countdown to kind of preemptively decide where we want to be standing and where we want to position is a good idea. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we can also just additionally set a sound notification for this, and we can set it to what I always use for any kind of movement-based ability, where when I get a buff or debuff, I have to go do something with it. I have to move somewhere. I have to clear something. I have to do some kind of specific mechanic. I always use the flag taken PvP sound, so that's what I'm going to use for this. It just sounds like that. And so every time I hear that noise, it's telling me, hey, you got to move. So we'll do that. And then we have Consuming Stomp, which is just unavoidable damage that he does. And he eats all of the trees that are remaining that we didn't clear. So nothing too special about that. We can just leave that alone. And then Erupting Fissure is a frontal that he does on the tank. So don't need to worry about that. But I do usually have a noise for frontals, so I'll just go ahead and do that. So I'll go to Sound Settings. And then for frontals, I use this retro arcade sound pack, and I usually use the sound effect 190. That's just a noise that tells me that a frontal is happening. Cool, that's it for Leymor. Very simple boss. Next up is Azureblade. So we have Overwhelming Energy, which is where she hits 0 energy and goes to the middle of the room, shields herself, becomes immune to damage, and then spawns a bunch of adds, spawns a bunch of orbs, and causes quite a bit of chaos. So I think for this one, we would probably put a countdown for this, just so we know when this is happening, so we can kind of plan for the intermission, because that's where healing cooldowns are going to need to be used and stuff like that. So we'll enable a countdown for that. And then we have the Draconic Images. This is just a little ad that she spawns. We don't necessarily have to have anything for this. I don't think it's too important, but one thing that could be useful, I don't think I'm going to do this for myself, but you could set like this voice pack where it says things, so it'll say like ads. So you can have it do that when she spawns an ad. I'm not going to personally do that because it's very easy to see when she's spawning it, and it's not like it's a giant rush to kill the ad as fast as possible. Ancient Orb, that's where she turns in a random direction and then shoots a frontal at a random player. So that we definitely want to set the frontal sound for, which again is 190 on the retro sound pack. So we hear that and know to move out of the way. And then we have Arcane Cleave, which is a frontal. So again, we use the frontal noise, which is also 190. And I think so that we don't have the same overlapping noises, which is actually very important, I think what we will do is, because this is just a tank frontal that we don't really need to be that aware of because the tank should just be not facing it into us, I'm going to actually set this back to just its default alarm setting, which I think it was it the alarm or alert? I don't remember which one it was. We'll just go with the... Yeah, we'll just do alert. That works. Cool. So that's it for that boss. We got our countdown set, and we set things up for each ability. Next is Telash Greywing. And this boss has very few abilities, but very important ones nonetheless. So Absolute Zero is where he goes into the middle of the room and does a bunch of unavoidable damage, and then also lethal damage to players who aren't inside of the vault runes. So for this ability, I think we would do a countdown for this one, just so we know ahead of time when we're going to have to start moving to the little vault zones. And then I think with this, trying to think here. Frostbomb. Yeah, we'll go ahead and have a countdown for Absolute Zero, and then Frostbomb we don't really need anything for because that's pretty obvious when it's happening. And then Icy Devastator is one where it targets a specific player and then does splash damage to that. It does unavoidable damage to them and then splashes to all nearby players. So this, we don't need to know if it's on another player because we'll be able to see that through our unit frames and stuff. So instead, we're going to set to only when on me. And then if we get targeted by it, it will make this sound, which we're going to set it to the sound that I talked about at the start of the video, where if we hear this sound, we want to be pressing a defensive. So this is the sound that I personally use. It's 183 on the Retro 2 sound pack. And it sounds like that. Very loud, very unique, and it tells me whenever I hear that sound, press a defensive. It doesn't matter what's going on. Whenever I hear that noise, I know I just press a defensive immediately. So that's easy enough for that boss. Next up is Umbrelskul. And Umbrelskul has Brittle, which is just the ads that spawn that you need to kill, so we'll just leave that alone. And then Fracture, which is if the crystals explode, so again, another thing that we can ignore. And then Unleash Destruction is a knockback that does unavoidable damage, so I think we would set up a countdown for this, because that way we just know when to expect the knockback and unavoidable damage to the group. And then we have Arcane Eruption, which is, I believe, the big swirlies on the floor. So don't need to worry too much about this, but what we can set this up for is... Actually, I'm going to leave this alone because there's another thing that we have to dodge, which is the Crystalline Roar. It's a randomized frontal, like we've been talking about. We've been seeing a lot of those. So we set this to that 190 arcade sound, which is the frontal sound. And then Dragon Strike is a big, heavy tank hit. And I think what we will do for this one, what's the default sound for this? Let's see. I think what we might do... is... do we do Dispel? Yeah, I think we'll do that. So we'll change this one to say Dispel, because this is a very important ability that you want to dispel as soon as possible, especially in higher keys. So knowing when that's happening is going to be really useful. So I'm just going to set it to that. That way when I hear that, I just know, oh, okay, I got to dispel the tank in a second. Cool. And that's literally it for all the bosses. That was very fast. Now we'll go through some of the trash. And we have Erratic Growth, which is just a cast that needs to be interrupted. We have Waking Bane, which is another interrupt spell. But we're not going to set anything up specific for those because we'll just see them on their cast bars. And then we have Forbidden Knowledge, which is just a bunch of avoidable swirlies on the floor that do a bunch of damage. Again, very telegraphed and very obvious when it's happening. Icy Bindings is super, super important to interrupt. So what I'm actually going to do for Icy Bindings is... I think enable a countdown, and I'm going to set the countdown voice to Diva. which is the... Oh, is it not going to work? Oh, yeah, well. I always set the voice to Diva if it's something that I need to interrupt. So if I hear Diva's voice counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I know that as soon as that countdown's finished, there's going to be an important cast that I can be ready to interrupt. That way I'm just extra prepared for it, basically. And then we can even go one step further and set the alert noise to say interrupt, so that it will just tell us when exactly we can push the button. So we listen to the countdown, we're ready to interrupt, then we hear the word interrupt, we can literally just press the button and it will interrupt the ability. And then we have Crystalline Rupture, which again, nothing that we need to worry about too much. And then Arcane Bash, which is a frontal, it looks like, sends targets in a cone in front of the caster flying, inflicting damage. I don't remember what mob this is on, the Arcane Construct. Oh, okay, I know which ones those are. I don't think we need to worry about those. I'm pretty sure I have a weak aura for this, but if we wanted to, we could set this to the frontal noise. So for now, I'll just set it to that. And then if they end up overlapping, I'll just remove one, either the weak aura or this. There we go, frontal noise for those. And that is it for Azure Vault. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next one.